She walked through the front door at 10 o'clock at night smelling like another man's cologne, sat down across from me at the kitchen table, and smiled. Not the kind of smile that says, "I'm sorry I'm late." Not the kind that says, "I know we need to talk." The kind that says she'd already won something. And then she told me, just like that. Casual. Like she was telling me about traffic on I-285. "You know what happened today, Boyd? I had a one-night stand with my boss, and honestly, I'd do it again." I looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. Then I picked up my fork, cut into the last piece of the pork chop I'd been eating alone at that table for 2 hours, and chewed it slowly. I didn't slam the table. I didn't yell. I didn't say a single word. She expected fire. She got silence. And that silence? That was the most expensive thing I ever gave Lena Mercer in 14 years of marriage. Because by the time the sun came up the next morning, she finally understood what that quiet really meant. And she wasn't smiling anymore. My name is Boyd Mercer. I'm 44 years old. I run 3 hardware stores in the greater Atlanta metro area, one in Smyrna, one in Kennesaw, and one in Marietta that I opened 11 years ago when nobody thought a small independent could survive next to the big box chains on Barrett Parkway. People told me I was out of my mind. I told them I knew my customers better than any corporate floor manager ever would. Turns out I was right. 3 stores, 18 full-time employees, and a reputation in Cobb County that took 20 years of early mornings and calloused hands to build. I grew up in Cartersville, about 45 minutes north of Atlanta. My father worked at a plant nursery his whole life, and my mother cleaned houses. We weren't poor, but we understood that everything you had was something you earned, and everything you earned could disappear if you got careless. That lesson sat in my chest like an anchor. Still does. I have a son, Tate. He's 22, from my first marriage, which ended before it ever really started. His mother and I were too young and too stubborn, and we knew it within 2 years. The split was honest, at least. No games. We co-parented Tate without drama, and he turned out to be the kind of young man who makes you proud without needing to be told to. He's finishing up a business degree at Kennesaw State right now, working part-time at my Marietta store on weekends. Good kid. Solid. And then there was Lena. I met Lena 11 years ago at a Chamber of Commerce event in Marietta. She was working in commercial real estate at the time, sharp as a tack. Funny in that dry way where you don't always realize she's made a joke until 3 seconds after she's delivered it. She was 33 then. Beautiful in a way that made a room shift when she walked in. We dated for 2 years, got married at a vineyard out in Dahlonega, up in the North Georgia mountains, and I thought I'd finally gotten it right the second time around. For a while I had. But people change. Or maybe they don't change. Maybe they just finally stop pretending to be who they were in the beginning. I've never been able to figure out which one it is with Lena. All I know is that the woman who walked through my front door at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night in March was not the woman I married. And I think, if I'm being honest with myself, she hadn't been that woman for quite a long time before I admitted it. Before we go any further, if this story is hitting close to home, if you know what it feels like to sit at a kitchen table alone wondering where your life went sideways, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment below. Tell me what you're going through. You'd be surprised how many people are sitting in the exact same chair you're sitting in. And stick around, because this story is far from over. The signs had been there for months. I just didn't want to read them. Lena had taken a new position at Callaway Group, a commercial development firm with offices in Buckhead. Her boss there was a man named Garrett Callaway. Yes, the owner's son, which tells you everything you need to know about how he got the title. He was 38, twice divorced, drove a black G-Wagon with a personalized plate, and had the kind of confidence that comes not from earning anything, but from never having to. Lena talked about him constantly in the beginning. Garrett this. Garrett says Garrett thinks the Midtown project is going to close at $12 million. I didn't think much of it. Lena was ambitious. She had always talked about work like other people talk about sports. Then the talking about Garrett stopped. Just like that. Gone. And if you've ever been in a long marriage, you know, when someone stops mentioning a name they used to say every day, that's not nothing, that's something. Her phone habits changed around the same time. She used to leave it on the charger in the kitchen every night, face up. Then it started going to bed with her. Then it started coming into the bathroom. Then it developed a new passcode that she set herself one Saturday afternoon while I was out back doing yard work, without mentioning it and without thinking I'd notice. But I noticed. She started coming home later. First it was 7, which I understood. Commercial real estate doesn't keep bankers' hours. Then it was 8:30, Then 9. The excuses were always reasonable on their own. Client dinners, late showings, site walks that ran long. The kind of thing that sounds fine once and sounds like a pattern by the 15th time. I want to tell you I confronted her. I want to tell you I sat her down and demanded the truth early, that I was some kind of decisive man who faces things head on. But the honest answer is that I didn't, because part of me wasn't ready to know. When you've built a life with someone, when you share a mortgage and mutual friends and holiday traditions and all the small ordinary architecture of a long marriage, there's a part of your brain that protects you from the knowledge that would require you to burn it all down. It's not weakness, it's survival instinct. And it can cost you. What snapped me out of it wasn't a gut feeling. It was a Tuesday in January when I came home early from the Kennesaw store. The HVAC had gone out and we closed at 3. And found a receipt on the kitchen counter from a restaurant on the Atlanta Beltline. 2 glasses of wine, an appetizer, an entree, another entree, 2 desserts. The date was a Thursday 2 weeks prior, a night Lena told me she'd been at a networking dinner with 6 people from her office. You don't order 1 dessert apiece at a table of 6. You order a plate for the table, maybe. But 2 desserts means 2 people. Intimate, deliberate. I took a photo of that receipt with my phone and said nothing. I called my accountant, Sherman Dade, the next morning. Sherman had been handling my books for 9 years, a quiet, methodical man who worked out of an office on South Cobb Drive and who I trusted completely. I didn't call him about business that day. Sherman, I said, I need to understand the full picture of our household finances. Joint accounts, anything you've processed for Lena personally, everything. He was quiet for a moment. This a tax question, Boyd? No, I said. Another pause. You want me to pull everything? Everything. And Sherman, I need you to be discreet. He said he understood. He pulled 3 months of joint account statements and cross-referenced them against the tax documents he had on file. What he found was that Lena had been moving money. Small amounts, nothing dramatic. 200 here, 350 there, from our joint savings into an individual account I wasn't a signer on. She'd opened it 8 months ago. Over those 8 months, she'd moved just under $4,000 into it. Not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but nobody moves money in secret for innocent reasons. I took that information to my attorney, Colette Rashad. Colette ran a practice in Marietta focused on family law and high-asset divorces. She was direct, fast-thinking, and she did not waste words. So she's building a cushion, Colette said, leaning back in her chair and looking at the statements I'd brought her. That's how I read it, I said. How long do you think this has been going on? The affair, not the money. At least 6 months, maybe longer. Colette nodded slowly. Georgia is a no-fault divorce state, but behavior matters when it comes to asset division and potential alimony disputes. If she's been conducting an affair and moving marital funds, that's relevant. I want you to do a few things before you do anything else. She told me to document everything I could without confronting Lena. Photograph the receipts. Screenshot any relevant financial activity I had access to. Write down dates and observations with timestamps. Keep it factual. Keep it cold. She also told me to do one more thing that I hadn't expected. Start separating your business assets in ways that are legally defensible, she said. Not hiding anything. Everything through proper channels. But make sure the picture is accurate before anyone starts making claims about what's marital property and what's not. I'd already put all 3 stores in an LLC years ago, on the advice of my original business attorney. Colette said that was in my favor. We spent the next hour going through the structure carefully. By the time I left her office, I had a plan. Not a revenge plan. Not a dramatic plan. Just a quiet, methodical, Boyd Mercer plan. The kind that starts with information and ends with solid ground. And I had not said a single word to Lena. February passed slowly. I watched and I documented and I kept going to work and coming home and eating dinner and sleeping in the same bed. And every night I lay there in the dark next to a woman who was already gone, and I grieved something I hadn't lost yet and wouldn't admit I'd already lost. Tate called me during this time. He could hear something in my voice even over the phone. He always could, even when he was a kid. He'd ask how things were going and I'd say fine, and there'd be a pause where he was deciding whether to push, and then he'd let it go. One Sunday in late February, he came to the Marietta store to work his shift, and afterward we went to get dinner at a barbecue place on Whitlock Avenue we'd been going to together since he was 12. He ordered the pulled pork like always. I ordered the brisket. We talked about the store and his coursework and his plans after graduation. And then he set down his fork and looked at me in that straight, patient way he has. Dad, what's going on with you and Lena? I looked at my plate for a second. Then I looked at my son. He's 22, but sitting across from me in that booth, he seemed older, steadier than I felt. I'm working through some things, I said. Is the marriage in trouble? Yeah, I said. First time I'd said it out loud. Yeah, Tate. I think it might be. He nodded once, slowly, the way he does when he's taking in information he doesn't like but isn't going to argue with. What do you need from me? That question, of all the things he could have said. What do you need from me? 22 years old and he's asking his father that. Right now, just let me handle it, I said. Don't say anything to anybody. And know that whatever happens, the stores are solid, my life is solid, and I'm going to be fine. I know you will be, he said. And he picked up his fork, and we finished dinner. March came, and with it, the night everything changed. It was a Tuesday. I had spent the morning at the Smyrna store and the afternoon doing paperwork in my home office. I made dinner around 7. Pork chops, roasted potatoes, green beans, the kind of simple meal I'd always been able to put together without thinking about it. I set one place at the table. Lena had texted me at noon saying she'd be late. Some deal she was working on. I texted back. Okay. Then she stopped responding. I texted at 5 when I started cooking. Dinner around 7. You want me to save you a plate? Nothing. I texted at 7:15. Food's ready. Nothing. I ate alone. I cleaned the kitchen. I sat back down at the table with a glass of water and waited. Not because I expected anything good, but because I needed to see what she walked in as. At 10 o'clock, I heard her key in the lock. She looked polished, not the disheveled look of someone who'd been in long meetings. Her hair was down, and it had that kind of careful quality that takes deliberate effort. Her lipstick was fresh. You don't reapply at 10 at night after a work dinner without a reason. She smelled like a cologne I didn't own. She set her bag on the counter and looked at me sitting at the kitchen table in the light of the overhead fixture. And she smiled. The wrong smile. The one I mentioned at the beginning. You were waiting up, she said. Not a question. Not quite an apology. Just finishing my water, I said. She sat down across from me, leaned back in the chair, and I watched her decide something in real time. I could see it pass across her face like a weather front moving through, and then she said it. You know what happened? Today, Boyd? And she said his name, Garrett. And she told me exactly what she'd done and where, and that it wasn't the first time, and that she didn't regret it, and she'd do it again. I think she wanted me to overturn the table. I think she wanted me to scream. I think she needed me to make a scene so she could cast herself as the victim of my reaction, rather than the architect of her own choices. That's the way some people work. They do the damage, and then they need you to lose control so they can point at the explosion and say, see, this is why. I didn't give her that. I looked at her for 3 seconds. Then I picked up my fork and ate the last piece of pork chop on my plate. I didn't say a word. She waited. She watched me. The smirk slowly went somewhere more uncertain. Boyd, I finished chewing. Put down my fork. Picked up my glass, drank the last of my water. Stood up, carried my plate to the sink, rinsed it, placed it in the dishwasher. Boyd, say something. I turned off the kitchen light and walked down the hall to the guest room, where I'd been sleeping for 3 weeks without telling her I'd made that decision, and I closed the door. That night was the quietest I'd slept in months. The next morning, I was up at 5:30. I showered, dressed, and made coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a legal pad beside it when Lena came downstairs at 7. She looked like she hadn't slept. She stood in the doorway to the kitchen and looked at the table, at my open laptop, at the legal pad covered in notes, at the stack of documents beside my coffee mug, and something in her face shifted. She was reading the room. She was starting to understand. What is all that? She asked. Business, I said. She poured herself coffee, stood at the counter. The bold confidence of 10 o'clock the night before was completely gone. In its place was something watchful and a little afraid. Are you going to talk to me? She asked. I'm going to talk to my attorney today, I said. I already have an appointment. The coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Your attorney. Colette Rashad. You've met her. Christmas party 2 years ago. Lena set the cup down on the counter. "Boyd, I'm not angry, Lena," I said. And I meant it. The anger had already happened, in private, over weeks, in the car on the way home from work, and in the dark at 2 in the morning, and in every quiet moment I had to myself while I was working through what I knew. I'm past angry. I'm at the part where things get organized. Organized, she repeated, like the word didn't quite make sense. I've been talking to Colette since January, I said. After I found the receipt from the Beltline restaurant. 2 desserts, Lena. You told me it was a table of 6. She went very still. Sherman pulled the joint account records, I continued. The individual account you opened in June, he found it. Nearly $4,000 moved over 8 months. I watched her face. I kept my voice level. I'm not bringing this up to punish you. I'm bringing it up so we're both clear that I've known for a while, I've been preparing, and now we're going to move forward in an organized and legal fashion. She sat down at the table across from me. She looked, for the first time since I'd known her, genuinely caught. How long? She said quietly. How long have I known? Or how long have I been preparing? She didn't answer. Long enough, I said. Colette is filing paperwork today. I've already moved my business assets into a structure that reflects their premarital origin. The stores have been in an LLC for 6 years. That was always going to be protected. But we've made sure the documentation is airtight. The house we'll deal with properly. Lena put her hands flat on the table. Boyd, I don't want to fight you on this. Good, I said. Because I don't want to fight either. I want a clean, honest settlement. I'm not trying to leave you with nothing. I'm not that kind of man. But I am not going to pretend that what happened is something we can repair. Not after last night. She looked at the table. Her jaw was tight. I don't know why I said it that way, she said finally. Last night. The way I told you. I don't know why I did it like that. I thought about that for a second. I thought I did know why. She'd wanted a reaction she could use. She'd wanted chaos. She'd spent months making a secret decision, and she needed me to make one too, loudly and badly, so she wouldn't have to sit with the full weight of hers. It doesn't change the outcome, I said. And I went back to my laptop. Colette filed that afternoon. By the end of the week, Lena had retained her own attorney, a man out of Sandy Springs whose name I recognized from billboards on I-75. I was not surprised. Lena was nothing if not efficient when she finally decided to move. The next 3 months were the kind of months you survive rather than live. I went to work. I ran the stores. I talked to Colette twice a week. I had dinner with Tate on Sundays, and I told him as much as he needed to know without making it ugly. He handled it with more maturity than most grown men would have. The settlement negotiations were uncomfortable, but not vicious. Lena's attorney pushed on the house and on the stores. Colette held firm on the LLC structure. The businesses were premarital assets that had been formally documented as such since before the marriage. The house was the marital home, and we handled it the way you handle a house. We agreed to sell it, split the equity, and each move forward. What Lena's attorney hadn't anticipated was the documentation on the individual bank account. Moving marital funds into a private account, even small amounts, is not a neutral act in Georgia divorce proceedings. It gave Colette leverage. Not to destroy Lena, just to level the table. The final settlement was fair. Not generous to her, not punitive, but fair, which is what I'd wanted from the beginning. I moved out of the Vinings house in June and into a place I rented in East Cobb, a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street off Johnson Ferry Road with a big backyard and a covered porch that faces west. I have had more peace on that porch in 4 months than I had in the last 4 years of my marriage. The stores are doing well. The Marietta location just had its best quarter since I opened it. We're expanding the tool and equipment rental section, which was Sherman's idea, and which I should have done 3 years ago. Tate works Saturdays, and we have dinner most Sundays. Sometimes we cook at my place now instead of going out. He's been teaching himself to grill, and he's better at it than he'll admit. I think about the night Lena sat across from me at that table and told me what she'd done. I think about it the way you think about the exact moment you understood something that had been true for a while. Not with bitterness, more like the feeling you get when a storm finally breaks. The relief of knowing what you're dealing with, even when what you're dealing with is bad. She expected fire. She got silence. And that silence said everything she needed to hear, even if she didn't understand it until the next morning when she came downstairs and saw the legal pad on the table. Some people will tell you that moments like that are about winning or losing. That's the wrong frame. It's not about beating anyone. It's about knowing who you are when someone tries to take it from you. It's about being the kind of man who doesn't have to yell to be heard. My father used to say that the quietest man in the room usually knows something the rest of them don't. He was talking about negotiations, about dealing with suppliers and contractors, about the way you carry yourself when money is on the line. But I think he was talking about more than that, even if he didn't know it. I think about Tate at that barbecue restaurant, setting down his fork and asking, "What do you need from me?" 22 years old, already more grounded than I was at 40. If I did one thing right in this life, it's raising a young man who asks that question instead of telling you what you should feel. My life is smaller than it was 6 months ago. One house instead of two. Quieter evenings. No more trying to read a room where someone is always managing a secret. That smallness, that simplicity. I didn't know how much I'd wanted it until I had it. Some losses are the best thing that ever happened to you. It just takes a while to see it that way. I'm Boyd Mercer. I own 3 hardware stores in Cobb County, Georgia, and I once sat at a kitchen table and finished a pork chop while my wife told me she'd slept with her boss and she'd do it again. And the next morning, I had a legal pad and a plan and 14 years of patience that finally had somewhere to go. The stores are still there. My son is still there. My name is still good in this county. She took the smirk. I kept everything else. My personal take, the power of the quiet man. What fascinates me about Boyd is his discipline. Lena didn't just come home with another man's scent. She came home looking for a fight. She wanted fire. She wanted screaming. She wanted chaos to justify her own betrayal. But Boyd understood something most people don't. Silence is the ultimate boundary. By simply finishing his dinner and saying nothing, he told her she was no longer worth his energy. While she was playing a one-night stand game, he was playing a long-term legal game. He didn't lose his temper because he had already prepared his exit. He didn't just protect his hardware stores, he protected his dignity. My takeaway is this: you don't have to yell to be heard. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is go quiet, get organized, and let the truth do the talking for you. Lena thought she won a night. Boyd won his future, and that's the difference between someone who is just ambitious and someone who is truly solid.